Well, we're in studio again for the Stalman Podcast, which is my favorite way to do it because somebody came to me. It's very helpful. So, Gerald, Undone, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
And you came here to do a studio tour, which is already on your channel at the point. I mean, we're recording this ahead of time, obviously.
Are we pretending we're in the future right now?
We are.
Okay.
So let's not talk about the news because it will be very dated by then. But no, you came here, looked around the studio. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on how could I improve this glorious space that we're in right now?
I mean, it's great. I think that you have a really nice studio in terms of it looks nice, it's laid out nice. It's you did a good job with it.
Well, I was just fishing for compliments, so you can stop there.
And it's functional, definitely. Like we played around with your shot a little bit. We lit it and we got behind the camera, and everything's great. Obviously, the only two things that I would say are making your job harder for yourself is that you have to set up every time. Mm-hmm. But if that's unavoidable, then that's what are you gonna do? But we did talk about how your sound solution could be something you don't have to set up as much if you treated your space, because you have a large space.
Yeah,
I think that you should.
Which you're probably actually hearing right now in the podcast. I mean, if you know what my voice usually sounds like, it's a bit less reverby. Right now we're in the big room because we're also recording a video at the same time. But it's really hard to control in here. We're surrounded by sound blankets, and I think it's making not much difference probably. But what do you think in terms of choosing between controlling like the ceiling, the wall? I mean, obviously everything is ideal. But is any one thing the most important place? Or, for example, people like bass traps. When I see MKBHD's studio, he always has bass traps in the corners. Are those more important than the walls? Is anything more important than anything? What's the least money I can spend to make this good?
I guess what they would tell you, this isn't my field of expertise, but I have talked to a lot of people.
Well, you did a video about it, so now you're my
expert.
But
I had an expert on, right? So usually it'd be that you can target things. So for instance, if you say you played piano or something, right? And you had the piano in this room, you could honestly probably just roll up the keys one at a time, and you might hear a key that just sounds wild over in the corner. Right. So then you'd know where it's resonating and at what frequency. That can give you a better idea of I need to deal with bass over there.
I bet there's a tool that does that, right?
There is. Yeah, you can put a speaker, right. Maybe float it at a certain height and just let it run through a frequency range. And you'll probably have to run around like a maniac and go to different corners. But I did this in my apartment originally a long time ago. Because of that exact reason, I play piano at home, mm-hmm. and there was a low D that was, it turns out it's really common, with 8-foot ceilings, there's a standing wave at 140 hertz, but I could actually go to different spots of the room, and some spots you couldn't hear it, and then other spots it sounded just so grossly rumbling in that corner.
Right.
So I was I'm going to put some bass traps in there, because that's a low frequency, right? So if you find out what frequencies are problematic and where they are, then you can attack them, and that would be more sort of a precision strike on the sound.
Right.
But if you have just kind of oh, my room's really wet or really big or I have a high ceiling or whatever, and you don't really want to be running around listening to different corners, then
I
put stuff everywhere.
I don't want a wet room. So let's dry this place out. I don't know. I don't know if this will ever be solved, but it's on my mind. What's some more general advice for setting up studios? You've started to tour a bunch of other people's spaces, seen what they do. When people are setting something up, is there any, I'm just hitting you with this, but is there overall advice that people often make a common mistake when they're getting started, or things that you did with your space when you got started and you are so glad you fixed it?
So not just with sound, but just anything?
Life.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because I think sound is always the hardest one, because you get a space that looks great and then you're it sounds terrible, right? And that's something everybody's going to have to tackle.
Also, for this sound stuff, a really good example now is just what watching MKBHD do his new studio as it goes. You can hear earlier on, he tweeted some videos of the empty rooms, and you're going to be able to hear it get more compressed. Oh, also Peter McKinnon was showing the audio.
Anytime anybody gets a bigger space, the first thing you're going to find is you have bigger sound problems, right? So, but
aside from sound,
after that, I think that the walls, in terms of what you're going to do with color and paint and something, that's something that I didn't bother with painting at first or doing anything with the walls, and it makes a big impact. If you want to have a really kind of high key or kind of airy look, paint the walls white and choose a white that, I don't know. I mean, you could go to Becky and Chris for this kind of what type of paint and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think I always choose the wrong paints, but
we're name dropping pretty good so far. We got three YouTubers in 60 seconds.
These are all paid placements. But yeah, I think like if you
they're actually all teases for your upcoming studio tours. Is it?
True, I'd say I think Becky and Chris, whenever they get theirs finished, you know, and then I'll go in and tell them, you got a good sound. But they'll have probably the paint thing sorted out.
Exactly, soundproof paint.
A soundproof paint. Now that's a thing. I wish somebody would come up with that, you know, because then that would be the solution. But yeah, I mean, choose a color that makes sense to you. So if you want something moody or you want something bright, make a plan there, because otherwise you're gonna do sound treatment or something else, and then you're going to paint. It's going to be pain in the butt. So paint is the color of your walls makes a huge impact. You can tell in here. You have a lot of natural light and you have white walls. Right. You can make this whole place glow if you want, right?
Well, there's other advantages to having white walls of being able to bounce. You know, we have a projector in here. We can watch stuff on the projector.
Sure.
But yeah, especially bouncing light and keeping it clean. The thing about white to keep in mind is it also isn't cinematically the most beautiful color. So like you've added a darker background lately, which looks better. Like it's much more interesting to see some contrast, see how light is shaping the wall. And if you just have white, it's hard to make it. It has one look.
There's a flip side of that though. Two things. One, you talk about soft light all the time. And obviously if you have a giant white room, you could just throw lights up.
That's what we do.
Like, I mean, by that, I mean like shoot light.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like upward.
Into the corners and into the ceiling.
And you'll just get kind of like, it won't be a huge light like a key light, but you will get softer kind of little fills in all the little cracks everywhere. Versus if you have a dark space, if you look at some of my videos before, lately I've thrown like 3 more lights on because I was like, okay, maybe we're too moody now, you know. Right. The shadows that I have, like they're black. Like I have like black things in my ears and stuff like that. And I was like, I need to put some more light in there. The other thing that's worth noting if you want to go with a dark wall, if you do plan on throwing some light on it or some color on it, is that YouTube will destroy that.
Yes.
The gradient that naturally occurs if you put a light on, I have a purple wall. If I put a light on it, it goes from like light purple to dark purple, right? I get like 6 colors on YouTube of that versus the 3,000 that should exist in real life. So if you want something that will be simpler, again, white has its place. White or like black maybe or something, you know.
No, white is the most helpful for being able to shoot. I mean, in here sometimes we've done this a lot where we just start lighting it, we're putting lights up, and we're like, we want it really soft and airy for this. Like it's a bright photo. And all the lights pointed at the subject never feels soft enough. And we're like, wait, what if we put all these modifiers away and blast it in the corner? And then we're like, oh, that's it. Now we got a whitewash. I mean, it's shapeless and boring. Like it takes away any attention from the light because it is just a wash, but it's instant and kind of always looks good as long as you don't have any color in the room to contaminate it.
And depending on who the subject is too, and this, like I shouldn't generalize here, but what I found is that a lot of the female creators that I've talked to prefer less high contrast ratios across their skin and stuff like that. So this is something I would maybe like advise, is that keep in mind what kind of like ruggedness you want to your shot. You know what I mean? So if you're I'm going to go with, if you're a guy who, you think you look cool with like a half black shadow on your face or whatever, then sure. But
if you think your wrinkles make you look cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I find that, but if you're doing anything that's like beauty vlogging or anything like that, then you don't want to be monkeying around with dark walls and moody looks, because you're going to you'll hate it eventually, Totally. And this goes, I'm trying to make this also applicable for any photographers out there too. Like the white stuff is for photography, 100% go white. Don't even consider anything for
else.
Sure.
Because then you can change it in any way you want. Another thing I've been thinking about is we've got this backdrop stand and a whole bunch of paper that we swap in and out. I feel like I need to get the switchable rolls. So you know how you can have multiple rolls? Potato Jet has this in the background.
Like a three chain system with 3 rolls.
I didn't realize I could mount that on stands until I just noticed the other day when I took a closer look at it. So you don't have to have it on the wall. You can send it up and just have a few different colors sitting there.
Interesting, because the other advice, I suppose, that would be something I would suggest based on somebody like me who has a space problem now, and you who I would argue doesn't, but you are keeping your walls very
bare.
I was trying to choose a nice word to say they're clean. You have really clean walls.
Oh, okay.
But if you are looking to make a studio, I think you'll find that you'll have a bunch of stuff that doesn't get used often, but you keep, and get that stuff up high and out of the way or something like that. If you have a small space, you're going to have to Casey Neistat your studio and use every inch that you can, because if you plan on accruing stuff over years and stuff like that, you're going to run out of space. I'm in a situation now where I have too much stuff, but I don't know what to get rid of exactly. And it's not like a hoarding problem. It's just like for what I do, you know.
Another challenge is, this is just about buying gear, is making the right decisions about like what will actually be valuable. What will I keep using in 10 years? You know, I've referred a few times to when I first got into shooting video, I bought this whole Zacuto shoulder mount kit.
Yeah.
Like all the accessories. It's the expensive brand. They're really well made, but just the shape of cameras changed. You know, I'm not shooting on a 5D Mark II anymore. The way you don't need to put that viewfinder on turns out a loop on the back of your LCD isn't how people shoot. Yeah. And that was a lot of money and still sitting in my closet, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with it. So it's getting rid of those things that you paid good money for, but aren't necessarily as desirable anymore, can be frustrating. So sometimes it's knowing like, hey, if I invest a lot in this kind of thing, either I'm going to make my money back from it right away because I work enough, it's important enough to my daily work that it's just worth it, or it'll still be valuable and usable in 10 years. So things I've really found were worth spending the money on are like good cables. I don't know, cables break, good tripods. My crappy tripod is the oldest thing I own in this studio.
I think that's the case for most people probably.
Yeah, totally. Stands, you know, that's actually a good example. Looking around the studio, we didn't talk about it in the video, but I've got quite a few light stands, which as a photographer, that's totally where you start, is like thinner. Usually, you know, they're like hollow black metal.
Yeah, like
what is it?
$20 camera store light stands. Or
totally,
whatever.
Yeah. Or even like these are the Manfrotto ones, which cost more, but they're meant to be portable. Is a bit of a priority, and they're not super durable. And I'm not really going to buy many more of these. I'm only ever going to have a portable kit of that, and everything else in studio, I want to be like big, thick aluminum C-stands. There's some like rolling stand. There's a rolling stand from Impact that's in here that I really like because it's just heavy and it also folds up pretty easily. And
it's basically a C-stand with like 3 fold-down wheels, right?
Yeah. I really like that format. So all of those stands are going to outlive the camera store stands that I bought, you know, a few years ago, but they're all kind of falling apart at this point. They're thinner, they break more easily. And yeah, I don't know.
It's true. Even like the cheapest C-stand, like if you get like the newer ones or whatever on Amazon versus an expensive light stand, if you want to call it that I find that the cheaper C-stands can do a hell of a lot more and take much more of a beating than.
And the price differential's not
that much, yeah. Because an expensive light stand's $100 something and a cheap C-stand's $100 something, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You might
just get the good one.
Yeah.
What else do I have around here that's worth it? Okay, so I've also got these foam pads behind us. I just want to criticize them for a second. If you go to B&H and you look for like sound baffling or whatever, you're going to find these sound boards that stick onto mic stands. And a lot of people have bought them. I think Marquez had them in a video. I know Justin had them in a video, and he was just on the other day. And everybody that puts them up, like they fall apart. So I'm just saying.
Are these or these DIY?
Yeah, the ones that you can reach behind you and touch you. Yeah, they were expensive.
Oh, okay.
$400 for the pair, and they're both falling apart.
And that's something that you could make quite easly as well.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
You can get a piece of wood and maybe some spray glue and stick some foam on it, and then you're halfway
there. Well, that's what you have to do to fix them now that they're falling apart anyway, so they'll become DIY. And then microphones, super worth it. You don't necessarily need the best of the best, but you know, we're talking to 2 mics that I like right now, and I can't imagine a day that they won't be useful.
Sound blankets are good.
Yeah.
More useful than foam panel board.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess to close the loop on those sound panels, the blankets look horrible. I'm constantly trying to hide them in shots, whereas I don't mind the panels showing up. But the blankets are 4 times as big. They're much more absorbent.
And cover windows with them.
Yeah, and
throw them on the floor.
The ones I got can become a reflector. They're black on one side, white on the other, so they can be a neg or a bounce.
So they could be sound and bounce simultaneously. Yeah.
And this is the reason I didn't get moving blankets, because if you go to Home Depot, you can get things that will have a very similar audio sound, right? Like they will still absorb it because they're just big, thick blankets. That does most of the job, but they're blue. And then all of a sudden,
and you gotta balance out the blue.
Yeah, if it's anywhere near you, you've got all this blue bouncing back into you, and kind of worst case scenario. So
that goes back to my paint thing. Be careful of the colors you choose if it's going to be in front of you, because again,
this is something I see a lot of photographers ignore and drives me kind of crazy. Is when there's just a lot of splashback from either a wall nearby, maybe the most common one is grass.
Grass, yeah.
You know, just shooting.
That green under look is not on.
No,
you look
it's
sick.
not good.
Yeah.
And if you happen to have shot it, because, okay, you can't always necessarily control it. Like, best case scenario, you hopefully lay down something either white or black, depending on the look you're going for, in front of them. Some kind of blanket, or just throw a reflector on the ground, something to block that green light from coming back. If you didn't do that, I always paint it out in Photoshop. Like, I just pull out the green all under the chin there. And it really makes a world of difference. So especially if you're doing this for work, like you're taking portraits, this is getting out of the studio. But.
It's much more time consuming though. We've done soccer portraits before where you have to blast through hundreds of like in leagues and stuff like that. And
what did you do?
Post. And that's not that's not fun.
It's not as fun as it sounds.
Luckily, I wasn't editing those. My partner Julie was, and I remember multiple times her saying something to the effect of like, "Oh, I want to be so done with this like retouching," you know, because of. But yeah, I don't know. You're also kind of like on the fly all the time, and like maybe it's raining, so you bring everything inside, then you got to go back outside. You're not like, oh, I'm gonna lay down my blanket to reduce the green, and then you just get in post, and you're like, oh, the green, you know.
Yeah, but also you probably did a lot of favors for those kids because I'm sure they do. Like, there's also people that don't notice that difference. Like, they don't it's
true.
There's all these things that make images look better that a lot of people don't know. That's why they think it looks better or worse. So you go to all this work and nobody knows that you did it, but they would.
The funny thing about league portraits is that they're so like their lifetime is short. Like, you might put them in a chest forever, but they're only going to be on the fridge or whatever they're doing for that season. Yeah. And then the next season, your kid looks completely different, and there's a new one to come around. So I think the amount of work that we put into the lifetime of that picture, you know, it's good, maybe, but you got to be proud of what you got to be proud of what you do. Right. So put the work in. But
well, I'd also say when people are shooting in studio, a lot of the time I see people place subjects unnecessarily close to backdrops where there's a lot of splash.
Yeah.
You know, and depending on the size of your space, like I think in your space, you are the distances you have to be because that's how wide your room kind of is.
Yeah. I mean, I could move it around a little bit here and there, but then it becomes like a flow problem.
Right.
You know,
well, and you also get width issues because if you move too far away from the background, then you see the edges and whatever. But I see so many portraits where the default is like the person just walks up to the backdrop and stands almost touching it, like directly in front of it. And you get all of this bounce back from it where it fills the back of their hair, starts to turn that color. The shadow is right behind them. So you can tell they're almost leaning against a wall. In general, try to pull them out. And you know, the more you can, the better. Like when you see extremely high-end professional stuff, usually there's a huge amount of distance between the subject and the backdrop, and they're being lit separately. And that also gives you the advantage of being able to control that ratio. Yeah. If they're on the backdrop, you can't separate them from it, right? The same light is having an equal effect on the person and the background. If you can get them at least a couple feet out and you have multiple lights, your key that is on your subject can be doing something different than what's hitting the backdrop.
And I think that's a sort of a rookie mistake that happens outside the studio too, where maybe you have an interesting, the common one I see all the time in Toronto is that we have like a graffiti alley, which you've probably seen photos.
I know the alley, yeah.
And I think the idea is that you lean up against a wall and then you take the photo of you because it's like, look, I'm in this like graffiti alley place, but it doesn't look right because you also get this like harsh light that usually cuts in between the buildings, and so you put this really vivid shadow on the wall as well that has like a perfect outline. And if you step away, then obviously that softens up because you're adding distance, right? Like, well, in a different way. You cast the shadow in a stronger way, but it doesn't have this like the same size as you. Yeah. It's not two of you,
right?
You know, in a weird way.
That's like the really weird thing that'll happen when it looks like a Photoshop effect where there's a perfect outline.
You put drop shadow on them or whatever.
Exactly.
Right? And,
avoid that.
And the details are so sharp and these graffiti things are so vivid that you capture the same amount of like saturation and contrast and everything on the graffiti as you do on the subject. So you don't know where to look in the photo. You need to pull it away so that it gets a little bit not like you still want to know where you are, but it reduces the impact of the background so that you look at this. I mean, I'm basically saying identify the subject of your frame, you know, and make sure that you're showing that. But I do think that that's what happens all the time. It's like, that's a neat background.
Stand against it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lean on the statue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
You know, if you can avoid it. People will know, oh, is that the Eiffel Tower in the background? You don't need to be like tangled up in the girders or whatever, you know?
Yeah, right. It's true. So Gerald, you go really in depth in your channel about video specs and stuff. When you review all these cameras that are coming out right now, what are some of the things that are most important? Like what's your number one feature that not every camera has, but gets you excited in 2020?
I guess because I shoot with two completely different systems in terms of what they have, I can see where it's like, oh, I wish that this would cross over onto each other. So I shoot a lot on the Sony, everything like a A6600, A7 III, whatever. And they have similar flaws in terms of what they're missing. And then on the other side, I have like Blackmagic cameras, which I think have everything that the Sony's missing, but are missing all the stuff that the Sony excels at, right? So depending, I guess, on what you do, having a higher bit depth would be nice to have.
That was going to be my first one. 10-bit is missing 10-bit is driving me crazy.
10-bit 422 should be the standard moving forward.
How much does 422 matter compared to 10-bit in the real world? Because I'd never compared them side by side.
As in, like,
if you have 10-bit 420 versus 8-bit 422.
Probably not a lot for the average person. There's some things where it's a clear winner. If you do keying stuff, green screen, that kind of thing, it's important. I think the easier way to think about it is that it's like color resolution in a sense, right? So if you're doing something where the lines are going to be important, so like with keying, obviously you want that line, the edge, yeah. Then there's a huge impact actually. Some people won't even touch 420 if they're like serious keyers, right?
Right.
But if you are shooting a complicated shot like this, where everything's kind of just trying to, blend into each other, it's probably not that important.
Right. What has really mattered to me a lot lately, and I especially appreciated this in the new Fuji, which the first time I'd shot a bunch of video on a Fuji was the X-T4.
Yeah.
And I know it was in the X-T3 too. 10-bit, 4K. I loved it because all of my banding problems went away. I know it can still show up in YouTube because compression, whatever, but I want my footage to look good.
Your video that you have is fine.
It had been killing me with the Sony. I'd been doing some client videos with 8-bit Sony cameras, the A7 III. Great camera, but when I'd get banding in the sky, like in a daylit, bright shot, I could be at ISO 100. Like everything is ideal here, but my blue sky has these hard lines going through it because of 8-bit. And I still get it on the Canon EOS R, which I'm using more now as my portable camera. But that's a big thing that I notice when I compare it to my bigger camera, to my C200. That cleanliness in a gradient is very important to me now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, because I shoot like 12-bit RAW on my camera and then 8-bit highly compressed. I guess that would be another thing too, is the codec itself. If we want to have 10-bit, 422, 4K, 60p in camera, whatever, we're going to have to deal with H.265, tough to edit, kind of highly compressed codecs.
Right.
But it would be nice if there was an option to not use that. We're like, okay, I'm taking on the load here of the 400 or 500 megabit per second. I'm going to chew up through my cards, whatever. But just give me options. That's my answer. Whenever the Fuji is a great example.
I love the way Fuji did this.
You can do whatever you want.
And the menu option is so clear as well. When you flip through the different Canon options, it just has some little numbers.
Language
yes, exactly. It's like all it says is the compression method, but it doesn't say how many bits per second, and it doesn't tell you anything about it. In the Fuji, it was just so obvious, like this many frames per second, this many.
And they give you extra information you didn't even think. When you're choosing a frame rate, at the bottom it'll be like, this is good for this, and if you have this with that doesn't work. And you're like, oh, thanks. It just explains everything.
Totally.
Where with Sony, usually I have to have, whenever I get a new Sony camera and I'm setting it up, I always have the PDF of the menu up, so I can
spend a week
look up what turns off when something turns on, just things like that. So options.
How much does bit rate play a factor? Have you done I haven't done any direct tests with it. So like if it's 50 megabytes, is it bytes or bits? Bytes.
Usually bits is the rate.
50 megabits per second compared to 100 compared to 400. Those are some of the different options out there. How important is that compared to some of the other numbers we mentioned?
Again, I guess it depends. If you're doing a lot of if a lot of motion is being compressed, then you'll appreciate a higher bit rate. If we're talking about just image quality, right. Right? But for the most part, it depends on how well the compression is handled. There can be two 100 megabit per second codecs where one is bad and one is good. Generally, though, the better the codec is, the harder your machine
has to work
because it's like so smartly packed that your CPU has to figure out, how did they put this in this box, right? And it has to figure that out. Image quality generally not huge unless it's a lot of motion, you're filming water or something like that, or foliage, whatever. But again, if it's a talking head scene, you're not going to notice the difference. It comes more now into saving yourself time in post.
Right.
And a looser codec, especially if we can use like mezzanine or intermediary codecs like ProRes, DNX, whatever, those are going to, even GoPro Cineform, right? Those are going to be way easier to edit, but they take up more space. Which is why I advocate often for external recorders.
Well, so why didn't we start off a conversation about image quality by saying 8K? Why aren't we talking about K right away? I mean, I know this is a setup, but because this is what most people would be excited about. They're like, image quality, I need to see as many Ks as possible in my next camera.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this ever since digital cameras for shooting photos were a thing where it's always megapixels.
It's the new megapixel
aren't everything, right? Yeah. They've never always been everything. It depends on, there's a lot more factors going on in a digital image sensor than just how many pixels there are crammed into it. Although, I guess compared to photo cameras, 8K isn't an insane amount of megapixels compared to what we're seeing now on the high count cameras. But I think the answer would just be that it's how the image is processed and handled more so than how much lines of resolution that it has. But there's definitely benefits to having more resolution when you need it. But we've seen, no names, but I've seen some cameras that come up that are pushing like, look at what we can do. We've got 4K this and 6K that and 8K that. And when you look at it, you go, your 4K looks like 1080 right. And your 8K looks like bad 4K. So there's some sacrifices being made there. So you definitely, I mean, unless all you're doing is punching in, because a
lot of us are.
A common conversation to say on YouTube now is the Pocket 4K versus the Pocket 6K. And there's some benefits to the 6K, but it costs more. So for the most part, I would say if you're never going to punch in, then you can probably just get the 4K and it's fine, It is a little bit sharper on the 6K, but what are you doing with your image too? Are you watching it on a phone? Like, is that where it's going?
When I see all these cameras, I mean, it's not that many, but we've got a Canon announcement that there will be an 8K video camera coming out at consumer level. A lot of the people getting the most excited about it when I look at, say, Twitter or the comment sections aren't the people that do a ton of production. I think if you shoot a lot of video, to me, 8K looks like a huge burden. I'm like, my computer can barely handle that. That's a lot of memory cards. It's a lot of hard drives in the end. And for something that nobody can watch in 8K. So yeah, again, it's like capturing 8K could be useful if you're going to punch in that much, if you will use that resolution. And right now, if you don't have a need for that, like on a daily basis, you're like, man, my 4K just isn't enough. I'm always stretching it to the limits and I can see the blur. If you're not already doing that, you don't really need 8K.
Although interestingly, back to my, pushing mezzanine codecs, I wonder if 8K ProRes versus 4K H.265, there might be a machine difference there. Because I do think that if your computer's getting its butt kicked, that you should look at changing codecs before other aspects. But I do agree that it's the same with photos, right? You got to look at where's the photo going in the end.
Yeah.
Is it an 8x10, in a glass frame on an angle on your bookshelf or whatever? Then I don't think we need to be worrying about our 42 megapixel or 61 megapixel A7R4. Right?
When I look at a new camera now, I don't check how many megapixels it is because I don't really care. What else we got? There's things like IBIS. Does every camera need IBIS at this point?
Yeah, sure. But it doesn't need to be.
I agree.
When I was monkeying around with the X-T4 video, I did like a shaky hand vlog test kind of thing, just for fun. Because I mean, that's, there's not many cameras that handle that. So we'll see, is the X-T4 up to that kind of like gimbal-like kind of thing, right? And it's just no. But nobody really is, except for like Panasonic and Olympus's like dual system, right? But you do need IBIS for photography, because why not?
Yeah.
Like, why be forced of like, I got to shoot at 1/200th for this lens if you don't need to.
I also think you need it for video now, even just for getting a tripod out of the equation, because I really know, again, when we're talking about the X-T4 a lot here, I really noticed that I could just stand there and it would feel locked off. Like it'd feel like a tripod shot.
Agreed.
It was stable enough if I'm not moving. And that's a big difference, because if I do that right now on my Canons, which aren't stabilized, you can see there is a micro jitter the whole time.
Especially with the long lens.
Yeah. I mean, anything past like 24.
Yeah. But I mean, when you throw like a portrait lens on there, it's surprising. Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially if you have the switch, because then if you have one that can go on and off, you can go off and then put it on. You're like, oh, wow, it's significant. Yeah.
It's another really common use is not necessarily gimbal work, but like handheld. When I'm shooting for clients, a lot of time it's just like handheld in place, and I'm just sort of like looking in the scene. Like, there's just a little bit of life to the handheld. So following a subject as they're speaking, which is a small amount to follow, but you can see those micro jitters so much more, and it cleans a lot of that up if either your lens or your sensor is stabilized. But so many lenses aren't. So
yeah, and you don't want to be restricted to choosing only the kit lens because you need that steady shot. You'd rather be able to use your Sigma Art lens or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I agree.
Record times
Unlimited. Anything less than that is ridiculous.
Yeah. But are we going to escape it this year? Is this the year that we'll stop seeing? Because I'm sure every brand wants to stop.
I don't think Sony's going to put in the camera anymore, and I don't think that, and Panasonic doesn't. So what do we got left? We got Fuji, Canon, and has Canon made any strides with their? Not yet. No firmware or anything, right? Yeah. So I think we're halfway there. So it wouldn't. Your next cameras, guys, just join the rest of the people that are obviously putting more time. Yeah. I would say that if you look at the cameras of what are people doing with them, people shooting video on Panasonic probably more than they're taking photos, right? Well, I mean, okay. The Panasonic photo crowds are like, but, you don't know anything about Micro Four Thirds photography and their high resolution modes and stuff, and that does work. But people that we talk to that have Panasonic cameras, they shoot video on them, right? So we just got to get it. And everyone will give you that argument about tariffs and it's restricted, this and that. Well, put the extra $100 on the camera if it's unlimited record time.
Yeah, get that version. Exactly. Give me the firmware update
for sure.
What am I missing? What are some flip screens? Okay, we're at this place where I was really excited about switching from having my Sony back flip up screen, which doesn't spin around, right? So you can't see it from the front. It's pain for vlogging.
Great for photos though.
Yeah, but when I switched to my Canon, I was like, this is what I want. I want a full flip screen, an articulating screen, because of course you do, vlogging. I realized there are downsides to it, and neither one is a clear win at this point, and it really depends what you're doing. The whole reason is because when you look down and a screen flips out to the side, you're off axis from it, so you're not really connected to what the camera's doing in the same way. And I started to miss that a lot for my Sony. So that means that's when you're operating from behind the camera. If you are shooting yourself, the full flip screen makes a lot more sense. What's your relationship with flippy screens?
I'm the same way. I think I was using the GH series from Panasonic and thought the flip out screen is great, and the cameras that don't have it, they don't know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And then I used Sony cameras that only had the little flip up kind of thing, which is great for photography. I like getting low, or even for video when you're behind the camera, right? Yeah. I like being behind the lens, like directly behind it. But then shooting myself was a pain in the butt. And then I tried the A64, A6600, which has the flip up screen where you can see yourself.
I haven't really shot with that yet.
That's the best. So moving forward, what do we want to see in 2020? Yeah. You got two options, camera companies, okay? You can do what the A6600 method where it flips up. So you still get your regular tilty thing behind the lens. Mm-hmm. So you're always directly with the lens. And when you shoot yourself, it's directly above the lens facing you. Some people complain that means if you put an on-camera shotgun mic that it blocks the screen, but put your mic somewhere else. Right. And then you got the best of both worlds. Or if you want to have a chonky monster like the S1H, you can just say, we'll just put everything in there where it flips out like your regular fully articulating, and it has a hinge that lets you do the, we'll call it the photography flip up and flip down,
right?
Thing.
Like medium format style.
But it's a big. You gotta build like a double hinge in there, and it takes up like a full, I don't know, half inch or something like that. But I think you got to go. Those are the two best methods to go. But having one that you can see yourself is better than not, unless you know that you're never going to see yourself. Then I think that the articulating screen might be a problem.
Where are we at with full frame right now? I mean, if you look at the cinema world, all of a sudden they discovered full frame in the last year or so. The Alexa LF is out and is shooting a lot of the major motion pictures we're going to see in the theater soon. And the Canon C500 Mark II, full frame version of what I got. We've also got the FX9 from Sony. The cinema world is suddenly full frame. Does that make it I've had this feeling that now it's more important than ever to have everything be full frame, but I don't know. Is it? Or can you still shoot Micro Four Thirds and the smaller sizes?
So there's nothing wrong with Micro Four Thirds, like in and of itself, and it's fine. You can do whatever you want. But I think that there's sort of and I might have contributed to this because I made like a video advocating for Micro Four Thirds when everybody was saying it's dead. Mm-hmm. It's not dead in the sense that you can still do whatever you want and it works. But full frame is better. in almost every way, save for maybe like readouts where you like sometimes you suffer with more like jello, with your rolling shutter and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and also probably image stabilization is sensor stabilization.
Apparently
is
not.
harder?
Again, if we reference Panasonic,
Okay,
the S1 and S1H are better stabilized than smaller sensors from competition. So
I haven't shot it yet, so that's cool.
Apparently, it's possible to still have your like amazing 6.5 stops on a full frame camera, but those cameras do read out slower than some other ones that I've seen. And a cine camera is obviously the way to go. Like they've got some with like global shutters, right? So where there's just no delay at all, you're not going to see any rolling shutter. So aside from that, full frame is always better. There's some arguments about like, well, maybe I want to have a certain exposure but have more depth of field, but that can be compensated for in full frame by just stopping down and jacking up your ISO, and it will be the same level of noise as. So there's nothing that you can't do with full frame. So yes,
you're just losing options.
You're just losing options.
So I need a C500 Mark II is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just trying to talk you into justifying it for me, but
as you know, you can get the job done with, in this case, the Super 35. Of course you can get the job done, or else we wouldn't have any movies or anything.
Yeah, we got the job done before digital. Exactly.
So there's nothing wrong with the other ones. It's just that if you had if somebody was like, I can put a full frame sensor in here and it'll have a fast readout and we can have image stabilization and everything, you'd be like, yeah, okay, we'll do it. Of course, you wouldn't be like, well, what if I'm shooting macro and I want double the depth of field? Well, it's like, no, that's not going to be a thing. We'll just stop down, I don't know.
What's the story with global shutter? Why do filmmakers care about it so much? And are we ever going to get it on consumer level cameras?
I mean, the reason why you care about it is that you're limited in what you can do motion wise, right? Like, have you ever
but what does it even do? I mean, for the people out there that may not know, because like it's not something I see average people talking about as much as more like seasoned shooters that have struggled with jello shots for a few years.
Yeah. So if you don't know what it looks like, I mean, just type in Sony rolling shutter into YouTube right now, and then go watch it. Like, well, once you're done watching or listening to this, and then take a look at that. And when you see something wish back and forth, your lines bend. Like if you think of something reading out in order, by the time it reads out, say, the top line of resolution to where it hits the bottom line, things are now in a different position because you were panning or something. And sometimes they take, like a quarter of a second or something. But if you're moving quick enough, at the quarter of a second, something's in a different position at the top than it is at the bottom. So you've curved a straight line. And that looks weird. It's weird looking. And it can be kind of, especially if you're moving around and if you don't have image stabilization, now you've got a frame where everything's moving, everything's warping. It's nauseating and difficult to look at. And so if you have one that doesn't do that, then you're not limited in any way by how you can conduct like your movement through the shot, or have what your subject's doing, or where you place your lines in the middle of a pan or whatever. You're only really limited then by your frame rate, I suppose, and just something that's an obstacle. Again, something I've noticed between my different systems, that the Sony has a rolling shutter more pronounced problem than other cameras or whatever. So I think another thing that at least I'm really fussy about is the input output ports on a camera.
Right.
First of all, you need to have them all. If you don't have at least a mic in, headphone out, some kind of USB port, because I really like to charge over USB-C power delivery now.
Not some kind. It's got to be USB-C now.
Yeah.
I am so into USB-C.
And if you accept power delivery as well, so I don't have to, I can't use my phone charger, I have to use some other thing.
100%.
Accept power delivery, let me charge it up quick. And then the HDMI, so many times I've heard the argument that the components we're too tightly packed to use a full-size HDMI. Micro HDMI sucks so bad. It's so bad, right? Full-size HDMI all the way. And then those other three things that we said. And that's all I really care about for ports. And if I can go on a little further with the HDMI thing, again, I guess give points to Fuji. I love having all the HDMI options. I want to be able to choose what goes out of the HDMI, what gets recorded in the camera. I don't want one thing to turn off when the other thing's recording. I want to know if I can put my info display on external and internal, or both, or one or the other. I want maximum control over that.
Also a tally light on Fuji. I'm very positive on Fuji, but we can take one away because they took away their audio port, right? The mic jack is gone from the X4.
That was a mistake. I mean, yeah, but at least they included the dongle this time, because the previous camera they didn't. They would get your own dongle. It's like, how about you just put the port on the camera? Fuji's great because it gives you maximum customization. And I think that's important for video, is that you need to be able to, because it makes your workflow easier, right? And so with HDMI, that's a big one, because if we go to an external recorder, or maybe it's just a monitor, or maybe I want to record my screen with or maybe I want to make like a director's, I don't know. I want control over what's coming in and out of my ports.
I haven't used it yet, but I want all external recorders to start supporting Raw, ProRes Raw.
We're early days of that, right?
Yeah, it's just getting started, but like I would love to see more support for that. Even actually just recording ProRes in general is pretty nice.
And support for ProRes Raw in the NLEs.
Yes.
Because right now I'm not going to use it because I think it's still Final Cut only. We need that in Premiere.
I'm always blind. I forget to like, I'm using it, so it's everywhere, but
exactly.
I know it's not. And actually, okay, here's a question that's just to solve some of my own problems. What is the best codec for moving back and forth between Windows and Mac right now?
ProRes is fine.
But I can't export it out of a Windows machine.
But why?
Because I also have a Windows laptop, and if I want to generate some files and then use them on Mac, what should I be using? Because Apple is dropping support for DNX.
Yeah, to make that question difficult. Can you do Cineform on Apple?
I think Cineform support is like disappearing. Like I thought GoPro was walking away from it.
Which is too bad because Cineform was excellent. Yeah. So
that's the thing. I think we're all of a sudden at a point like I don't know what's in between them.
ProRes is great unless if you're finishing, but if you're exporting ProRes,
which I am. I don't know. I'll ask you offline.
it's a tough one. I don't think there is a magic answer right now.
At the moment.
Really loose, like all eye something maybe, I don't know.
I think the last big one that cameras need to rally around and figure out is color profiles. Again, we're being really hard on Sony, which like, I don't know, maybe it's because we've shot it so much. Sony has too many color profiles.
They do.
And
so do a lot of brands though. Yeah.
Right. But they're not they're not rational when you look at the names of them. You're like, I don't know what I would use any of these for. And you have to rely on YouTubers
with this color, and you have to change the color gamut with the profile.
The fact that people are using HLG so often, that's a bad thing because HLG is not made for shooting. Like it is a Rec 2020 HDR format, and we're just piggybacking on it because
HLG gives people what they want, which is so what we really need then is just like 3 profiles kind of, and it doesn't have to be HLG.
I say 2.
You need done. Out of camera,
undone,
exactly, and then medium undone and fully undone. Essentially, so like something like whatever standard high contrast, and maybe you can tweak it a little bit. Maybe you like it a little bit milder, and then something that's like a flat. It'd be like Cine 2 on Sony or Eterna on and then Canon has. Do people even use like a flat profile in Canon?
Not really. There's not an in between. But I was about to say I really like the way Canon does it. That there is full contrast. There's like the photography profiles.
That's where you get 2 from.
And
your log or your...
and it's like, it makes the decision pretty easy. And they're both good. Like they're both nice profiles. I also think Fuji does it well. There's more like 3 because you could do any of the photo profiles or Eterna
or F-Log.
Yeah, exactly.
And Blackmagic, they have film, which is log, right? And then they have extended video, which would be like Cine or Eterna or whatever. And then they have video, which is like, that's your standard full contrast one. So 3 max, you can get away with 2. Anything more than that is you're complicating things, And I don't want to adjust 14 different fields of each one. You know what I mean?
Adjust none.
Yeah, it's like that's your film profile. Yeah. Cool.
Deal with the rest in post.
Exactly. Deal with it in post.
Yeah.
I don't think people agree with us entirely on that, though. I think a lot of people want to have a more get most things done in camera, but we both agree that it's like give me my maximum, and then we'll take it in post, and I'll figure it out from there. Transform it and do whatever we want to do. So
another not so clear win has been touch controls. I've been experiencing a lot of this switching to the EOS R, which I was using the Sony. I turned off the touchscreen because I didn't like the way it felt. Like it wasn't responsive I don't know.
Yeah, you can only drag.
Yeah,
it's a dragger.
It didn't work the way I expected, so I didn't use it. Now that I'm onto the Canons, I prefer the touchscreen, but they rely on it way too much, and it means that there's a lot of situations where you can't get where you want fast enough, or I find more accidental inputs. I also found that on the Fuji. We ski and shoot videos while we ski. I can't operate the camera properly.
Right.
And I actually just saw Dunna tweeted this, and it was like the opposite. I'm trying to get as many YouTuber names as we can into the. He was like,
predominantly Canadian too.
Yeah, exactly. Support your local Canadian YouTuber. But he was saying, like touch controls are no wait. Which control? Oh, it was a specific one anyway. He's saying the touch focus is better than using a physical control. And I'm like, I've been literally thinking the opposite every single day lately. It's like the fact that the EOS R wants you to touch all the time to move, even to move your focus point. You can't use a joystick.
Yeah,
I think is objectively worse.
It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. we were doing a sort of a test that I don't think is going to turn into a video, but we tested using an old, I'm saying old, but it's a 5D Mark III 7200. No, it was a 7D Mark II because we were shooting hockey, so we wanted that extra reach. And then we compared it to the A6600 with the Sony G Master 7200. And just in terms of usability, because with the Sony, it's supposed to be you just kind of like let it do it and knows what it's doing all the time. And the way that we used to operate the 7D Mark II was you would use a joystick and you would probably use like an expandable spot and follow the action with that, right? And not having the joystick on the Sony was a challenge because I think it's superior than, especially that the trackpad method of like you put it to your eye and then you move the point with the touch screen and then your nose gets in there and stuff. I'm a joystick all the way. Canon has a superior version now though on the 1DX Mark III, and I'd love to see this rolled out everywhere where it's not a joystick, it's an AF on button.
Did you feel it? Have you tried it?
Yes, it's good. Used it. It's very good. It's an AF on button that is like a touch sensitive nipple almost, where it kind of reminded me a little bit of like the old ThinkPad red button.
I thought of right away.
That was in the middle of like the thing. Yeah. So it's like imagine having that like ThinkPad red button that is also an AF on button. So your thumb is just in the perfect spot all the time, and the sensitivity. Maybe I don't know if you can dial it in, but it was tuned nicely when I that's the only way to go. Now that I've seen that.
Well, the other thing that'll happen with the touchscreen, that happens to me, maybe not anybody else in the world, but I have this problem that I'm always jumping to far corners because like your hand brushes by and constantly I'm like, wait, why is the autofocus point in the extreme top left corner, extreme bottom right corner? Because there's no difference of weighting of like, the camera doesn't know that corners are less important typically. That usually you only want to be in the center or towards the center, whereas a joystick, you have to try hard to get into an extreme part of the screen. So anyway.
Have you used much Panasonic stuff?
Not for years. I owned one a long time ago, but not.
But like 4 or 5 S.
No.
They have that whole thing figured out. They have Panasonic just kind of have everything on them in terms of like ergo stuff, I find. And their menus are great too. And you can touch screen the menus, or they have like 4 different controls. Do you like a wheel? Do you like a command dial? Do you like a joystick? And all the things are also buttons and everything. So you can navigate however you want. The touch screen works great. They probably have the best implementation of what a touch screen control situation should be like, where you don't need to use it, but if you do need to use it, it does exactly what you think it should do, and everything that you touch kind of works. Huge, like I would give if we were making some mega camera, I would take that system from them, and then throw in Canon's touch sensitive joystick thing, and then you got yourself. And then put Fuji's customization in there, and you got yourself
without making a complete Frankenstein camera, who's doing the most things right now? This isn't like what's your favorite camera, but just like who is on the path that will become the future of cameras?
Fuji's doing the most things right, but they have that issue where it's kind of like my video like thesis was basically the jack of all trades, but they don't really win. Like I said, jack of all trades, master of some, because some people think the Fuji Colors is the best way to go, or they like the Eterna, like Eterna's the best one, or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think, I'll just say it, Fuji Color is as good as Canon. It's different, but it's very, very easy to work with.
It's good, yeah.
Again, that's what I mean by goodness. It's not, you can get color out of all of these. It's just quick and simple to make it look pleasing to a lot of people.
So Fuji's probably doing the most things right, but the problem with them is that they don't master things to the point where you might buy a whole system for a feature. It's like for me right now, I say that if your autofocus is so important to you, then Sony is the clear winner. If you're shooting, like these days, if you're shooting sports or something, you got to go into Sony system. It's cheaper and better compared to the giant cameras from the competitors, right? Glass, I guess, is more expensive, but whatever. If you're shooting video where you want like the best eye detection, kind of just pointed at something, I still think that Sony's. So it's like, if you're buying autofocus, then you can buy Sony. If you're buying, the S1H for all the crazy thing, then you're buying that. Like Fuji doesn't have those kinds of clear wins in one specific vertical, let's say. But if you need a more rounded camera, maybe that's the answer.
I'm really hot on Fuji right now. I like it. They've been doing a good job.
Canon, I think, is trying to get there again, because they were doing things where they would have huge disparities between what they were doing right and what they were doing wrong, where that wrong thing might be a deal breaker for somebody, you know?
But the list of features on the 1DX3, which I haven't shot with yet. Wait, am I saying the right number? Yes.
1DX3, yeah. It's got everything in it.
Is amazing.
But
it's like
we're talking about a monster like DSLR.
I know, but they weren't getting it all right in the last 1DX in terms of the list of features was like not quite. Is like, you still left a few things.
The argument to be made though would be, should I get a 3 from a 2? And I think people are struggling with that because it's not. It's like, why would I want to get another like a 2+ in a sense? You know, even though the 2+, which is the 3, they got it right now. Yeah, you know what I mean? But yeah, like I think people would rather see an R2 or whatever, you know, that has all the 1DX mark, because the R5 or whatever they're talking about seems like it's going in a heavy direction one way. Or I think people would be happy with a professional R.
Exactly. You know, I mean, there's also R6 rumor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Rumors are boring, but
right.
You know, I don't know. We'll see. I think this is going to be, the better cameras get, the harder it is to talk about them because they're all so good. There's so many good cameras right now.
That's true. Yeah. Somebody could easily be listening to us right now and be like, these guys don't know about my day, whatever, you know what I mean? Because it's true. Cameras everything's amazing. Yeah. We're trying to choose which one
is the most
amazing. And the answer is none of them.
Yeah.
They're all good and none of them are perfect. And you can't really go wrong if you're just trying to get some images.
Yeah.
You can do it pretty much everywhere.
You're into Blackmagic right now, though. Like you're using them for yourself kind of often.
Yeah.
Are they on the right track? I mean, I also feeling in terms of editing software, like I edit Final Cut, you edit Premiere, but I think Resolve is coming up.
Actually, I edit Resolve now. I switched.
Oh, you switched?
Yeah.
Entirely? Okay.
I was at a point where I was saying both, and now I would say that I'm not really touching Premiere that much. I picked it back up like a week or two ago to see, I wanted to see, I'll throw a project in there, and I was getting annoyed. So, I would say I'm Resolve now, and Resolve annoys me too. From time, every program annoys everybody. You know,
it's a lot of Resolve that is very weird, but it's just so powerful. Like there's so much that happens in there.
So I would say I'm a Resolve guy now.
Totally, But their business model is going. That's why they're going to win, because now you can't bootleg Adobe stuff like you used to back in our day, which is the reason that we're all on Adobe, is because we'd all steal Photoshop and Premiere and After Effects and learn it and then buy it once we had clients. Now you don't need to steal Resolve; you just go download it for free,
and it doesn't handicap it that much.
No, I'm still using the free version. Yeah. I haven't paid for it yet, even though I use it for quite a bit.
If you buy a camera, you get the studio version,
right? So and right now, I mean, I know how much Resolve can do in terms of grading. It does a much better job than Final Cut does. But I do not like the workflow of
round tripping things.
Round tripping is bad. I don't know how people make it work
which is why I'm glad that Resolve is building out. I mean, they already have. Now they just got to like refine, you know, get it where it doesn't feel like, it still feels a little beta at times. Yep. And once they get that.
And it was really unreliable for me. Like it just crashed nonstop.
And you use it on Mac?
Yes.
So I don't have any experience with that, but
the App Store version turned out to be about half the problem.
Oh, okay.
Once I switched to the website version, the worst issues did go away.
Interesting.
But then also, I mean, I was trying to talk Jesse Driftwood into this, and then he was like, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll grab Resolve," and he downloaded. He's like, "I can't launch it. It instantly crashes. I can't even run it." Like, okay, well.
Resolve's not for you.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of like
you just dropped another Canadian.
I thought about it before I did. That was not an accident. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of having that feeling for a little while too, of like, man, this is just crashing all the time. Fortunately, I was able to get it working a little bit better. And actually, so that's why I was asking earlier about having a format I can pass back and forth. I've got a pretty nice PC laptop with like a NVIDIA card in it. It'd be great to be able to do, say, my grading on there and pass it off to my Mac for the final edit. And I could kind of be working in parallel a little bit. Like, it's generating, because I pre-grade my raw files and then I edit with like a transformed version. Right. But I don't know what to export it in right now. Because like I said,
then you want to put it back into your Mac?
I want to do the Final Cut edit. I want to do like my actual NLE editing on a Mac.
I mean, there are...
But you already said you don't know, so maybe I should stop asking. I just want you to give me an answer.
If you can't export ProRes, and if Mac won't allow you to take in a DNX, and if Cineform isn't really working, then you're just going to have to go for a loose, acceptable, like, I don't know.
But what else is there? I mean, other than uncompressed.
So I don't know much about what max policies, or like what Apple's in and out policies are. So I don't want to say something and be wrong about what you can do.
Right.
But you can use different containers. Obviously, you use like some MFX thing and then MXF container and put like a really sloppy codec in there, and it should be relatively easy to edit. I just don't know what you'll accept on the other end.
I'll keep searching them.
Which is the reason why I'm a PC guy, because I don't want to have to.
Well, so we're just in a transition phase. Like the reason Mac's doing this, if you don't like follow what's happening over there, this is also all conjecture, but it's obviously true, is because they're going to be moving to ARM processors. They're going to drop, the x86. Is that the name of
architecture for like Intel?
Yeah, they're going to drop the Intel architecture. So my assumption is that they're like, look, if we don't have to deal with these other big professional codecs, and we just push everyone to ProRes, we can optimize to the extreme. So once we get ARM laptops from Apple, they'll be insane with ProRes, but they'll only work with ProRes.
Yeah, kind of a single purpose monster.
And they already know that they're winning so much with ProRes is such a loved format. People are using it so much that I think they feel like they can force everybody else's hand a little bit. And I think they've opened up some of the ProRes abilities for Windows. So I'm hoping Resolve will just be able to export ProRes sometime soon. But it's not happening yet. So.
Yeah, that's the biggest tackle, or like hurdle. That's the biggest hurdle, is that you never know what the NLE of choice, where it's going to be limited in terms of. Could be anything from lawsuits to patents or whatever else, like with compressed raw, right? Yeah. But to answer the question you asked me originally about what's Blackmagic doing right, I think on the camera side, some things that I love about shooting Blackmagic is I love that I can use USB-C out to an SSD.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So I record everything.
I see everybody with those little clamps for their T5 drives or whatever.
Absolutely. That's what I'm using. I use a Samsung T5. Your bang for byte, if you will, is outstanding, right? And you can get a terabyte for like 200 Canadian or something. And that will let you record 3 hours of like full. There's a bunch of like raw, like either you can use like a Q base or a compression ratio, but even if you choose the highest compression or the highest quality, you can do like 3 hours on a 1 terabyte.
That's another thing. I got to say, that's another thing they're getting right, is having the compression options, like all that flexibility. It does internal ProRes, right? Or not?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, like there's just infinite options,
and you can record that to an SSD if you want.
And I am always wishing I had that. Like it would be so much more useful on every other camera. And I think they're the only ones really giving that much flexibility outside of cinema cameras.
You have to like adapt your cinema camera with like CFast to SSD kind of things or whatever. But they're killing it with that, with the codecs and like we talked about with having the correct amount of options, like 3 or whatever, they've got that figured out. And the stuff's easy to edit. I find that what's fun too? They give you this little tool, which is like, they call it like their B-Raw speed test or whatever, and you can run that. And it tells you what resolution and frame rate your computer can handle, so that you know like how to compress. I don't know,
right? Yeah,
cool. But I find it's pretty smooth. And if not, you've got ProRes there that you can use as well. So
with all these cameras we talk about, you don't seem to pursue cinema cameras at all. Like you don't talk about them. Yeah. Do you not care? They just like, you don't want to. You'd rather have you're reviewing a bunch of cameras instead of like investing all into one big one. Like what keeps you away from, C500s and FX9s and Reds? And
I guess it would be 2 things. One, my channel, I try to talk about things that are maybe more on the like economical side and have multiple functions. For me, I like finding sort of like hybrid value in things. And now that we're in like hybrid cameras, it makes sense. But I love things that either do one thing perfectly, and then it's like a no-brainer purchase, because then it's easy. I always talk about like a monopod example where it's like, that's the monopod that you buy,
right? And
then that's an easy decision, right? Yeah. But if it's not going to be an easy decision, it's complicated, then I want to know what gives me the most I can out of my money. And generally speaking, if you're somebody who likes to shoot photos, or you like to travel, then the answer isn't going to be a cine camera, because I mean, unless you want to
travel,
travel photos are both. Well, I was going to say photos are challenging. Photos are very challenging on the C500 Mark II.
Absolutely. I mean, I bet the stills, I'm sure, look fine. Yeah.
But so, that's probably the reason why I still use Sony so much, is that it becomes a very viable photo camera.
Right.
And then shoots good video as well. So,
okay, but if you were going to buy a big camera for your A-roll, what would you get?
So I think I'm like a C500 Mark II, FX9, and I haven't made the decision on that because of the price differential there. And also the FX9 is still pumping out some updates that are like, so
it's not quite settled. Like we don't really know everything about the camera.
But I think that's where I am.
Still waiting for Philip Bloom's review before we decide.
Yeah. I think that's my like my toss up, my two-way kind of choice.
It's the toss up of the year. I mean,
yeah, I wouldn't go beyond that. I have no need for an RE or anything like that, you know, and I don't think I would go into the Red ecosystem.
I mean, things about Red that would kill me is like not having internal NDs. Would be really frustrating.
And I'm not playing that whole Red Mag game.
Totally, either, so. Not having real autofocus, you know.
Proprietary media is like a deal breaker for me right out the gate.
Yeah.
Although I think like RE has their, but
but well, unless the new one's different, but the other ones are just CF. Not CF Express. The other one's CFast too.
Okay.
So
I just mean like didn't RE always have their like little RE like they look like little beta tapes or whatever like the old ones
in the past maybe I don't know.
In the past
now they're
so
not.
I was gonna say not like that had stopped RE from being a thing for decades is what I meant, but for me now I don't think I would monkey around with proprietary media.
That's, by the way, that's a lot of why I always talk about Alexa over Red is internal NDs. That's like, it's so huge. It's such an inconvenience to add things.
And there's no reason to not have that if you're at the price
and that
at
camera's
the
that
size.
big. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the LF has scratch audio, which is kind of nice, and a lot of Reds don't. Yeah. But colors are easy. No, there's something else I just forgot.
It's an RE. It looks good.
Yeah, the name's pretty cool. I don't know, but it's always the brand that I'm hot on. Oh yeah, and actually the storage. That is the other thing. Right. It's like I'm with you on the Red Mag thing. So
I accept a lot fewer things missing on cine cameras beyond say a certain threshold where I'm okay with that, like missing on a hybrid camera. Like if there's like on a hybrid camera, it's if I pull it up and there's no mic jack, I go, okay, well that's a deal breaker. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
But I will accept no internal NDs or something like that, or maybe like no phantom power or whatever, right? But if you give me a cine camera that has no internal NDs and no way to connect an XLR mic, I'd say you can get rid of that.
Yeah,
totally. I don't know what that is.
Well, and it's funny that even as you spend as much money as you want, like I was watching this video on the Area channel the other day, and they're mentioning that like, be careful with the order that you plug in your like SDI and DTAP power because you can short your monitor and your camera and break both of them if you plug in and unplug them in the wrong order and whatever. I guess this is a thing that a lot of operators know if they're dealing with it. But I'm like, no matter how much money you spend, there's still problems like that, which is crazy. Imagine breaking your $100,000 camera. It is going to hold up to a lot, but it's not indestructible just because you spent a lot of money, unfortunately. Yeah. Which is weird.
But it should be.
Yeah, it should be. You always imagine it should be.
Especially because you can literally like kick them.
Yeah.
And they're fine. Totally, so it's like, why is it that if I, plug this port in the wrong order, I start a fire? Like it shouldn't be.
It's crazy. Any parting words? Any parting wisdom?
On a particular topic or
life.
Just in general? In life. Don't
some Canadian advice.
To give some really cheesy meme advice. I would say that here's one that I get asked a lot that comes up, which is that there's always so many cameras that are about to come out or have been speculating or in the rumor mill. And people ask me, should I pick any camera that's out right now? You can give my example.
The 5D Mark IV.
Yeah. Should I get the 5D Mark IV because it's on sale at my local camera store?
Yeah.
Or should I wait for the 5D Mark V? So maybe we have a bad example, but I think it still plays. It still plays. Okay, which is that like, well, can you get the job done with the 5D Mark IV right now? Then get it, because you can't get the job done with a camera that doesn't exist, that may never exist, that may change, that may not be what you want, that may cost twice as much as the one. Like I don't know the answers to any of these things. So if you're trying to do something today, there's only one option of those two cameras, and it's the one that exists. So don't ask me that. I'll never say wait, unless the thing is you have a full set of gear and you're fine and you don't need anything. Then yeah, you can wait, because what does it matter? But the option when it comes to what should I get, the one that exists or the one that doesn't, get what will get you going. You got to get started and get making something and get the one that'll get that done.
I think a lot of people are bad at asking for advice when they reach out to YouTubers anyway. Another good example is like I did a video about do you need a Mac Pro as a creative professional? I think was the title of my video. It's like, well, don't ask me that. Like, I know I decided on the title, but like, you can't ask somebody else that, because like, how much money do you make based on the work that you do, and how much of it is based on the speed that you're able to export videos at, and do your clients care about any of the? I mean, all of the questions are in your camp as the consumer.
Exactly.
We don't know. So, all right. Thanks, Gerald.
Thank you.